And in this, I'm commenting on the fall of Lysychansk. That's a Ukrainian city in the district of Luhansk, so eastern Ukraine. And so Russia took that just a couple of days ago, which means the Russians now control the whole of Luhansk district. They also want to get the whole of Donetsk district, which means they will have the entirety of the Donbass region, as in the Don River basin. The city of Luhansk, sorry, the city of Lysychansk is on the western bank, the Severodonetsky River, and on the eastern bank, its twin city is Severodonetsk, which the Russians took about a week ago after something like 5 weeks of heavy bombardment. So the Ukrainians managed to hold on to Severodonetsk rather longer than most pundits forecast. However, in Lysychansk, the Ukrainians have had to cede that city sooner than the experts predicted. So this is getting worrying for the Ukrainians that Russia is speeding up. Remember, Mariupol heroically held out for about 6 weeks. You might say they fought the losing battle, and something like 1% of the Ukrainian army surrendered in that single fortress. The Azov steel mill there. But that wasn't futile because it did at least slow down the Russians very considerably. So perhaps the Russians are getting better. They've learned from some of the mistakes. They've ironed out some of their logistical problems. They'd already managed to cross the Severodonetsky River south of Lysychansk. The Ukrainians were obliged to withdraw because otherwise they're going to be enveloped. So Ukraine just confirmed that yes, they have ceded Lysychansk. Anyway, so there was a press communique by the Kremlin in which President Putin told his defense minister Sergei Shoigu just yesterday that the military units must carry out their tasks according to previously approved plans, as in to keep moving forward. Well, what's going to happen now? I mean, because they've crossed this major geographical barrier, the Russians' offensive could speed up, they could fan out. I think that's unlikely. I mean, their new strategy seems to be to select one target city and then throw everything you have into that. Just blow it to bits. Just pummel it and pummel it and pummel it into submission. Then you will inherit a pile of rubble, which obviously in the long term is not that great for Russia. Okay, they might win the war, but think they actually want to keep this territory. They don't just want to defeat the Ukrainians and withdraw. Russia wants to integrate this into Russia, and they're already talking about referenda in places like Kherson and these so-called People's Republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, of fusing them into Russia after referenda. They've been dishing out passports to people in occupied Ukraine and so on. But if you're going to then make it part of the Russian Federation, then you're going to have to pay the cost of rebuilding it, and you have to rebuild everything. And obviously Russia can ill afford that. Now their economy is tanking off these severe sanctions, so the people have fled. We need, the land isn't actually very useful on itself. You need people to work there, in farms, in factories, and whatever other businesses are there. And Russia also wants to gain more people because they've got more deaths than births, and that's not really happening. I mean, some Ukrainians are very elderly who can't flee, are staying behind. It is true that in Luhansk and Donetsk there are some people who are genuinely pro-Russian or ethnically Russian or Russian speaking. There's some people who are native speakers of Russian actually don't want to be part of Russia. I know some of them personally, because just because we speak Russian doesn't mean that we are Russian. A language is not a nationality. A nationality is not a language. If Putin thinks that language is nationality, but by that rationale, all Americans are English, it's ludicrous. India's got over 2,000 languages, and yet it's still a nation. Um, so I think that the Ukrainians made the right decision, but they need to build up defenses further east. What are they going to do? Anti-tank ditches? Are those a thing? Does that even work right now? So the President Zelensky, he says he's ingratiated to Occidental countries for the weapons they furnished his country gratis. However, they're just insufficient. They need more of them. And I don't understand what's happening because these HIMARS that the Americans and the British have handed over to the Ukrainians about 3 weeks ago, trained them on, well, more than 3 weeks ago. Surely they're being deployed now. Why aren't they making more of a difference? Maybe there's just not enough of them. So they need all sorts of more weapons, and that's going to make the difference. Longer range, more accurate weapons. The Ukrainians can destroy the Russians, and the Russians can't destroy them. So some of the analysts say that the Russian army is nearing exhaustion, that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for manpower, getting men over 40 to serve. They're trying to get more unemployed people to join. These conscripts doing their 1 year service, they're severely pressuring them to sign contracts to say for 5 years. Some people, guest workers from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan who've been laid off, been offered to join the Russian army, or maybe they'll recruit unemployed people from those former Soviet republics. Putin, they talked about economic cooperation, but perhaps that's the subtext to it. Anyway, so what are the Russians are going to try moving fast? We know they're not terribly good at blitzkrieg. They could scarcely move slower. Anyway, Lysychansk was a city of 100,000 people, but most of them have fled. And notably, the Russians, they're mostly conscripting or people from poorer parts of the country, sending them to the battlefront. People from the major cities, Moscow, St. Petersburg, very, very few, because they tend to be wealthier, better connected, and public opinion matters there more, protests matter there. And the opposition is relatively strong in a more cosmopolitan, educated city like Moscow. They're getting a lot of Chechens to fight there, a poverty-stricken region where Ramazan Kadyrov rules through terror. Anyway, so the Ukrainians are hitting back. They've been shelling some villages in the Kursk and Bryansk regions, but that's not very militarily effective. Some drone attacks didn't seem to be places of any military significance, so they shouldn't waste their ammunition. Plus, that's attacking civilians. And another subplot to this whole saga is grain. Obviously, Ukraine being such a breadbasket, like last year, at least 10% of all global wheat exports came from there, and they produce a very considerable percentage of the world's grain, cooking oil, and so forth. But that's more or less stopped. Well, obviously, because some of the farmers have fled, some of the equipment has been destroyed, combine harvesters and such like. Supply chains have been disrupted. Roads, railway lines blown up. I just had to be used for military equipment. So world food prices are rising. So anyway, Russia has stolen this grain and is selling it to places like Syria. So there's some farm laborers who's there who are carrying it out, and they're being superintended, or shall I say, maybe forced into it by armed Russian troops, right, in various districts, yeah, Melitopol district, Zaporozhye district, and so forth. Shipped out from ports like Berdyansk, through the Sea of Azov, through the Black Sea, through the Bosphorus, that 800-meter wide strait flowing through Istanbul, through the Sea of Marmara, the Aegean Sea, into the Mediterranean Sea, and then you can go anywhere in the Mediterranean. You go through the Suez Canal, the Red Sea, onto the Indian Ocean, or you could sail west through the Mediterranean, out through the Straits of Gibraltar to the Atlantic and anywhere in the world. Anyway, so some of these farmers under illegal Russian occupation say they've been obliged to sell at below market price. And how are you going to refuse with a gun pointed at your face? So this has got terribly bitter memories because, of course, in the early 1930s, the Soviet government, they seized huge amounts of grain, other foodstuffs from Ukraine, and it caused millions of people to die of starvation. About 3 million people died, and the Soviet government knew exactly what was happening. The Soviet government, which was fixated with capturing data, had informants everywhere, was a control freak government, tried to control every last gram of food. So this has resonances of that. Now, I don't think Ukrainians are starving to death. I'm not aware that a single one of them has starved to death. But it says, well, that I think the Turks will do, because Turkey, although it's a NATO country, has a cordial